The air in the house felt different when Ryan showed up. He was supposed to crash for a couple of weeks, some vague family favor, a pit stop before he figured out his next move. That's what I thought, anyway. Then I overheard him on the phone with his dad, late at night, voices low and sharp through the thin walls. "I'm staying," he said, and something in his tone made my stomach twist. Not dread, not exactly. Something else. The next morning, I walked into the living room and stopped dead. My family photo, the one with me, Mark, and my parents at the lake, all awkward smiles and bad lighting, was gone. In its place, a glossy shot of Ryan and Mark at some racetrack, grinning like kids, the sun glinting off a sleek car behind them. The frame was the same, my frame, but the memory was his. I stood there, coffee mug burning my hand, trying to decide if I was pissed or just unsettled. He caught me staring later that night. I was in the kitchen, chopping carrots for dinner, the knife louder than it needed to be. He swung open the fridge, grabbed a beer, and leaned against the counter, his eyes flicking to the photo on the wall. "What's the verdict?" he asked, popping the cap. "Not a fan of my interior decorating?" I kept chopping, the rhythm steady. "As long as you're not dangling women's shoes from the chandelier, we're good." He laughed, low and easy, but his gaze didn't budge. "Noted. But you didn't answer the question." I set the knife down, meeting his eyes. They were hazel, sharp, like he was always 3 steps ahead. "It's bold," I said. "Replacing my stuff with yours." "Bold's one word for it." He took a sip, still watching me. "You gonna make me take it down?" I could have said yes. Could have told him to put my picture back, to stop marking territory in a house that wasn't his. But something about the way he stood there, casual but deliberate, made me pause. "It's just a photo," I said finally. "Doesn't change anything." He smirked, like he'd won something I didn't even know we were playing for. "We'll see." That night, I lay in bed, Mark snoring softly beside me, and stared at the ceiling. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel still. Ryan was down the hall, in the guest room, probably sprawled out with that same smug grin. I thought about the photo, about how it wasn't just a picture. It was a statement. A claim. And I hadn't pushed back. I told myself it didn't matter. He'd be gone soon, back to whatever life he led before he showed up with his duffel bag and his 2 sharp eyes. But deep down, I knew better. The photo was just the start. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what came next. The days blurred after that. Mark was in and out, buried in work, leaving me to navigate Ryan's presence. He wasn't loud or intrusive, but he was there. Always there. Fixing a squeaky cabinet. Tossing a football in the backyard. Leaving dishes in the sink like he'd lived here forever. And every time I passed that photo, it felt like he was watching me, waiting for me to react. I didn't. Not yet. The second car broke down on a Tuesday, a coughing, pathetic sputter that left it dead in the driveway. Mark was already halfway to Vegas for some conference, so I was stuck. I could have called an Uber, but Ryan was there, jingling his keys like he'd been waiting for an excuse. "Need a lift to work?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. His t-shirt clinging to his shoulders in a way I pretended not to notice. "Fine," I said, grabbing my bag. "But don't make it weird." He grinned, like I just dared him. "No promises." The drive was quiet at first, just the hum of his truck and the morning radio. Then, as we pulled into the office lot, he glanced at my car parked across 2 spaces, one wheel kissing the line. "You call that parking?" he said, eyebrow raised. "I got here, didn't I?" I shot back, unbuckling. "Barely. Your Mercedes looks like it's begging for mercy." He killed the engine. "Come on, I'll teach you how to park like you mean it." I should have said no. Should have walked into the office and left him there. But something about his tone, half challenge, half tease, hooked me. So we ended up at the empty mall lot that evening, the asphalt glowing under the sodium lights. He stood outside my car, arms crossed, as I tried to slide into a space. "Smoother," he called. "You're jerking the wheel like it owes you money." I glared through the windshield. "I'm doing fine." "Fine's not cutting it." He walked over, opened my door, and leaned in, one hand on the headrest. "Scoot over. Let me show you." I didn't move. "I don't need a babysitter." "Then stop driving like one." His voice was low, playful, but his eyes were locked on mine. I slid over, muttering under my breath. He got in, adjusted the seat, and backed the car out, his hands steady on the wheel. "Like this," he said, gliding into the space, perfect on the first try. "Your turn." I took the wheel again, his cologne lingering in the air. He stayed close, his arm brushing mine as he guided my hands. "Easy," he murmured, his fingers warm over mine. "Feel the car, don't fight it." I froze, my pulse loud in my ears. His touch wasn't pushy, just there. I parked. Not perfect, but better. He didn't move his hand right away. "See? You've got it when you're not overthinking." I turned to him, our faces too close. "You always this hands-on with your students?" "Only the stubborn ones." His voice dropped and then he said, "You always freeze up when I touch you. Instinct or strategy?" I yanked my hand away, heat crawling up my neck. "You're too full of yourself." He chuckled, leaning back. "Guys who aren't don't grab the wheel." I got out of the car, the cool night air hitting my face. He followed, hands in his pockets, watching me like he was reading a book he already knew the ending to. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. I didn't answer. Just walked to his truck, my heart still racing. I told myself it was annoyance, nothing else. But as we drove home, the silence felt heavier, like we'd crossed a line neither of us could unsee. The laundry room smelled like detergent and warm cotton, a small humming escape from the house's new tension. I'd been avoiding Ryan since the parking lot, his touch still lingering like a bruise I didn't want to press. But I needed my favorite t-shirt, soft, faded, the one I wore when I needed to feel like myself. I pushed open the door and froze. Ryan was there, leaning against the dryer, holding my shirt like it was evidence. He didn't look up right away, just ran his thumb over the fabric, his expression unreadable. Then his eyes met mine, and something shifted. Sharp, electric. "You know how some people's clothes smell like they're missing something?" he said, his voice low, like he was sharing a secret. I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe to keep my distance. "What, you're sniffing laundry for clues now? Med school teach you that?" He smirked, but it wasn't his usual cocky grin. It was softer, like he was testing the air between us. "Not med school. Life. You can tell a lot about someone by what they leave behind." He held up the shirt, his gaze steady. "You, for example. You're all guarded edges and quiet ache." My throat tightened. I wanted to snap back, to deflect with something sharp, but his words hit too close. Instead, I stepped forward, reaching for the shirt. "Give it here." He didn't move, just held it out of reach, his eyes searching mine. "You don't like being seen, do you?" "I don't like games," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "And you're playing one." "Am I?" He set the shirt down on the washer, deliberate, like he was laying down a challenge. Then he stepped past me, close enough that I caught the faint cedar of his aftershave. He didn't look back, just walked out, leaving the door swinging and my pulse hammering. I stood there, staring at the shirt, my hand shaking. It wasn't about the damn shirt. It was the way he'd said, "quiet ache," like he'd peeled back a layer I'd spent years hiding. I grabbed the t-shirt, shoved it in the basket, and slammed the washer shut. The noise echoed, but it didn't drown out the alarm bells in my head, the kind that don't warn you to run, but to chase. That night, I couldn't sleep. Mark was still in Vegas, the house too big, too quiet. I kept replaying Ryan's words, his exit, the way he'd left me standing there, exposed. I told myself he was just messing with me, stirring trouble because he could. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. He'd seen something in me, something I wasn't ready to name. And the worst part? I wanted him to see more. The next day, I wore the shirt. Not because I needed it but because it felt like a dare, to him, to myself. When he passed me in the hall, his eyes flicked to it, then to me. He didn't say a word, but the corner of his mouth twitched, like he knew exactly what I was doing. And for the first time, I didn't look away. The Texas Grill's parking lot smelled like smoked brisket and diesel, the kind of place where you could hide from your own thoughts. I was there with Jess, my oldest friend, splitting a basket of fries and dodging her questions about Mark's latest work trip. "He's fine," I said, waving her off. "Just busy." But my eyes kept drifting to the lot, where Ryan stood by his truck, alone, his silhouette sharp against the neon sign. He didn't approach. Didn't wave. Just stared, his gaze heavy, like he was waiting for me to make a move. I looked away, focusing on Jess's story about her new boss, but my skin prickled. He was still there when we left, leaning against his tailgate, scrolling his phone. I didn't say goodbye. Neither did he. Later, my phone buzzed as I sank into the couch, still in my jacket. His text lit up the screen. Saw you. You saw me. Pretended you didn't. That how you handle him too? My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I could have ignored it, let the silence bury whatever this was. But my fingers moved before my brain caught up. You want me to wave next time? Roll out the red carpet? His reply was instant. I want you to admit you noticed. I stared at the words, my pulse kicking up. He wasn't wrong. I'd noticed him. His worn leather jacket, the way his hair caught the light, the quiet intensity that made the air feel charged. I'd noticed, and I'd turned away, because noticing felt like stepping off a ledge. The next morning, I pulled into the grocery store lot, still replaying his text. I was halfway to the entrance when Ryan appeared, holding a to-go coffee cup. My order, black with a splash of oat milk. He held it out, his expression neutral. Figured you'd need this, he said. I took it, the warmth seeping into my hands. You stalking me now? Nah. Just good at patterns. He shoved his hands in his pockets, his eyes steady. You're here every Saturday, same time. Same coffee. I didn't know what unnerved me more, his observation or the fact that he'd bothered. Why do you care? I asked, my voice quieter than I meant. He stepped closer, just enough to make the space feel small. Because you're not as invisible as you think. Then he turned and walked away, leaving me with the coffee and a knot in my chest. Back home, I set the cup on the counter, untouched. It wasn't about the coffee. It was the way he saw me, too clearly, too personally. Every interaction with him felt like a thread pulling tighter, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to cut it or let it unravel. I kept the lid on the cup, like keeping it meant holding on to the moment. But deep down, I knew. This was getting dangerous, and I wasn't stopping it. The backyard was silver with dawn, the grass still damp from last night's rain. I stood at the glass door, coffee mug in hand, watching Ryan move through his morning routine. Push-ups, lunges, sweat catching the early light. His focus was relentless, like he was fighting something bigger than his own body. I told myself I was just up early, not watching him. But when he came inside, shirt clinging to his chest, I didn't move from the counter. He grabbed a banana from the bowl, peeling it with slow, deliberate hands. Then he turned, catching my eyes. What would you do, he said, voice low, if you found out Mark was lying to you? The question hit like a stone through glass. I gripped my mug tighter, the heat biting my palm. Depends on what about. Feelings. People. Other women. He didn't blink, just leaned against the counter, the banana untouched in his hand. The air felt thin, like I was breathing at altitude. I thought of Mark's late nights, his vague texts, the way he'd started locking his phone. I pushed the thoughts down, meeting Ryan's gaze. I'd act like I didn't hear the question. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the salt on his skin. And I'd want you to ask me what I know. My heart thudded, loud enough I swore he could hear it. And I'm scared of what you'd say. He held my stare for a beat, then set the banana on the counter, unpeeled, like he'd lost his appetite. Without another word, he walked out, the door clicking shut behind him. The kitchen felt too big, too empty, the silence screaming what he hadn't said. I stood there, coffee going cold, replaying his words. He knew something, about Mark, about me, about whatever was rotting under the surface of this house. The way he'd said other women wasn't a guess. It was a blade, precise and sharp. I wanted to chase him, demand answers, but my feet stayed glued to the tile. Because what if he was right? What if Mark was hiding something, and I'd been too busy dodging Ryan's orbit to see it? The rest of the day, I moved like a ghost. Work, emails, a half-hearted jog. None of it dulled the edge. Ryan stayed out of sight, but his presence lingered, like a song stuck in my head. By night, I was back in the kitchen, staring at the banana he'd left behind. I threw it out, but it didn't feel like enough. Nothing did. I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay awake, Mark's side of the bed empty, and wondered what Ryan wasn't saying. Worse, I wondered why I cared so much. It wasn't just about Mark anymore. It was about the way Ryan looked at me, like he saw the cracks I'd spent years hiding. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to stay whole. The kitchen smelled like grilled onions and desperation. I'd suggested homemade burgers, hoping for something normal, something to anchor the house that felt like it was slipping. Mark was still gone, and Ryan's presence was a low hum, constant, unsettling. He volunteered to help, chopping lettuce while I shaped patties, the silence between us thick but not hostile. Just heavy. I flipped a burger, grease popping in the pan. Ryan slid the cutting board aside and leaned on the counter, watching me. Had a dream last night, he said. His voice casual but edged, like he was testing the water. Told Mark I'm in love with you. The spatula froze mid-air. I forced a laugh, sharp and thin. What, you practicing for a soap opera? He didn't smile. Want to know how it ended? I set the spatula down, meeting his eyes. They were steady, unyielding, like he was daring me to flinch. Sure, I said, my voice tighter than I wanted. What did he say? He didn't believe me. Ryan stepped closer, his voice dropping. Said you wouldn't either. The air felt too warm, the kitchen too small. I wanted to brush it off, to keep the banter light, but his words sank in, heavy as stone. That's a hell of a dream, I said, turning back to the stove. You should write it down. He didn't let it go. You think it's just a dream? I spun around, ready to snap, but he was closer now, close enough that I could see the faint scar above his eyebrow. Before I could speak, he reached out, his hand closing over mine. Not tight, not forceful, just there. His skin was warm, his grip steady, and for a moment, I didn't pull away. I just stood there, my heart pounding, the burger sizzling behind me. You feel it too, he said, not a question. You're just better at pretending you don't. I swallowed, my throat dry. You don't know what I feel. Then tell me. His thumb brushed my knuckle, barely a touch, but it burned. Tell me I'm wrong. I could've. I should've. But I didn't. I let his hand stay, let the moment stretch until the smell of burning meat snapped me out of it. I yanked my hand free, turning to salvage the burger, my face hot. You're gonna ruin dinner, I muttered. He stepped back, hands in his pockets, but the air still crackled. Dinner's not the only thing at risk. We ate in silence, the burgers tasteless despite the effort. He didn't push, didn't tease, just watched me across the table like he was waiting for me to break. I didn't. But when I cleared the plates, my hands shook, and I knew he saw it. Later, alone in my room, I stared at my hand, where his touch had been. It felt like a betrayal, not of Mark, but of myself. Because Ryan was right. I felt it. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could pretend I didn't. My bedroom door creaked open, and Ryan stood there, holding a phone charger like it was an excuse. The afternoon light slanted through the blinds, catching the dust in the air. I was folding laundry on the bed, trying to keep my hands busy, my thoughts quiet. He didn't knock, just lingered in the doorway, his eyes scanning the room like he was memorizing it. Looking for this? He said, dangling the charger. Found it in the living room. I straightened, wiping my hands on my jeans. You don't just walk into someone's room, Ryan. Didn't know it was a crime. He stepped inside, uninvited, and the air shifted, like the room was holding its breath. Smells like the ocean in here. It's a diffuser, I said, pointing to the glass bottle on the dresser. My voice was steady, but my pulse wasn't. He shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Nah, it's you. The words landed soft but heavy, like a stone in still water. I crossed the room to grab the charger, needing to move, to break the moment. He didn't hand it over, just held it loosely, his eyes locked on mine. You want me to kiss you, he said, not a question, not a taunt, just a statement, raw and certain. My breath caught, but I forced a scoff. I want you to leave. Doesn't mean I'm wrong. His voice was low, his gaze unrelenting. He took a step closer, the charger still between us like a flimsy shield. I should have pushed him out, shut the door, done anything to keep the line clear. But I didn't. I stepped forward, close enough to feel the heat off him, and before I could think, I kissed him. Quick, fierce, A single spark that burned through every warning in my head. His lips were warm, softer than I'd imagined, and for one reckless second, I didn't care about anything else. Then I pulled back, my heart slamming against my ribs. "Get out," I said, my voice shaking. He didn't argue. Didn't smirk or push. He just looked at me, his eyes dark with something I couldn't read, and walked out. I closed the door, leaning against it, my breath ragged. The room felt smaller, the diffuser scent too strong, like it was mocking me. I'd crossed a line, and there was no uncrossing it. The rest of the day, I avoided him. Kept to my routines, work calls, dishes, a run that left my legs burning but my mind no quieter. I told myself it was a mistake. A moment of weakness. But the truth gnawed at me. I'd wanted it. Not just the kiss, but the way he saw me, the way he made me feel alive in a house that had started to feel like a cage. And now he was gone. Not physically, but I could feel it, the shift in the air. Like he was pulling back, leaving me to sit with what I'd done. I stared at the charger on my dresser, its cord tangled, and knew this wasn't over. It was just the start of something I couldn't control. The house was too quiet after the kiss, like it was holding its breath. Ryan vanished the next morning. No note, no text, just his truck gone from the driveway. I told myself I didn't care, that it was better this way. But every creak of the floorboards made me look up, expecting him to walk in with that half smirk, ready to pick up where we'd left off. He didn't. Mark came back early from Vegas, his suitcase thumping in the hall like a warning. He was different. Quieter. His eyes skimming over me like he was searching for something. We were eating takeout that night, the TV droning in the background, when he set his fork down. "Ryan said something before he left," he said, his voice careful. "Said you've been feeling empty. That true?" My stomach twisted. I stabbed a piece of chicken, keeping my eyes on the plate. "Ryan talks a lot. He sees things." Mark leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Things you don't say out loud." I forced a shrug, my throat tight. Maybe he's just projecting. Mark didn't push, but the air felt bruised. We finished dinner in silence, and I spent the rest of the weekend cleaning. Scrubbing counters, folding sheets, anything to keep my hands busy. Ryan's absence was louder than his presence had ever been. I kept replaying the kiss, the way I'd leaned into it, the way I'd shut the door after. Had he left because of me? Or was this just who he was? Stirring up storms and then slipping away. Late Sunday night, I heard his truck pull in. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a glass, when the back door opened. Ryan stepped inside, his shirt torn at the shoulder, a rusted bike chain dangling from his hand. His eyes were shadowed, like he hadn't slept. I set the glass down, my voice sharper than I meant. "Where the hell were you?" He didn't flinch, just dropped the chain on the counter with a dull clank. "Out," he said. "Looking at places you're not." The words stung, cryptic and raw. I wanted to demand answers. Where he'd gone, why he'd left, what he meant. But his face stopped me, all sharp angles and quiet weight, like he'd been carrying something heavy for days. "You could have said something," I said, softer now. "Didn't think you'd care." He stepped closer, his boots scuffing the tile. "Do you?" My breath caught. The kitchen felt too small, the space between us electric and fraying. I wanted to say no, to push him away, but the truth was clawing at me. I cared, too much in ways I couldn't untangle. Instead, I turned back to the sink, gripping the edge. "Just don't pull that again." He didn't answer, just stood there for a moment before walking out. The glass in my hand was still wet, slipping slightly. I set it down, my reflection distorted in the faucet. Ryan was back, but something had shifted. The game we'd been playing wasn't a game anymore, and I wasn't sure who was winning, or what we were fighting for. The laptop hummed softly on the kitchen table, its screen glowing in the dim morning light. I was looking for a recipe, something to distract me from the static in my head. Ryan's return, Mark's questions, the kiss I couldn't unfeel. But instead of recipes, I found a file in the shared folder, buried under tax docs and old photos. A PDF. Divorce_draft.pdf. Downloaded 2 weeks ago. My breath stopped. I clicked it open, the words blurring as I scanned. Legal jargon, asset division, Mark's name typed neatly at the top. It wasn't filed, just a draft, but it was real. He'd been thinking about it. 4 weeks. While I was dodging Ryan's glances, Mark was planning an exit. I printed it, the machines whine loud in the quiet house. The pages felt heavy, like they carried more than ink. I slipped them into a drawer, not sure why. Maybe to confront him, maybe to pretend I hadn't seen. But the weight stayed, sinking into my bones. Ryan found me later, sitting at the table, staring at nothing. He was holding a mug, his hair still damp from a shower. His eyes flicked to the drawer like he knew. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. I didn't answer, just watched him set the mug down. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across the table. "You found it, didn't you?" My head snapped up. "Found what?" He didn't blink. "The papers. In the drawer." My heart lurched. "How do you?" "I saw you print them." He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You're not as sneaky as you think." I stood, the chair scraping loud. "This isn't your business, Ryan." "Maybe not." He tilted his head, eyes sharp. "But you're acting like it's a death sentence." "It's just a choice." "A choice." My voice cracked. "He's my husband. And you're his wife." He stepped forward, his voice softer but piercing. "So what? You think that means you owe him silence? Or you gonna fight for the truth?" I stared at him, my pulse hammering. "You don't get to tell me what to do." "I'm not." He reached out, his fingers brushing my wrist, light but deliberate. "I'm asking what you're gonna save, your pride or what's real." His touch burned, steady and unyielding. I didn't pull away, not this time. The room felt too small, the air too thin. I wanted to scream, to shove him, to demand why he kept pushing me toward edges I wasn't ready for. But I just stood there, his fingers on my skin, the divorce papers whispering from the drawer. He let go first, stepping back. "You've already decided," he said almost to himself. "You just don't know it yet." He walked out, leaving me with the hum of the laptop and the weight of a future I hadn't chosen. I opened the drawer, stared at the papers. Mark hadn't filed them. Not yet. But the fact that they existed meant something was already over. And Ryan, damn him, was the only one forcing me to face it. Mark left for another meeting, his suitcase wheels echoing in the hall like a countdown. The house felt hollow without him. Just me and Ryan and the weight of everything unsaid. I was setting up a new projector in the living room, fumbling with cables and cursing under my breath, when Ryan appeared, holding a screwdriver like he'd been summoned. "Need a hand?" he asked, his voice low, no trace of his usual smirk. I nodded, too tired to argue. We worked in silence, him tightening screws, me untangling cords. The divorce papers were still in the drawer, a ghost I couldn't shake. When we finished, we sat on the couch, the projector humming, casting a blank glow on the wall. I shifted away, putting space between us, but Ryan didn't move. He just sat there, elbows on his knees, staring at the empty screen. "Why didn't you stop me?" he said finally, his voice rough. "Back in your room. You could've." I hugged my knees, my pulse ticking up. "I didn't know how." He turned, his eyes dark, searching. "You still don't." The air crackled, heavy with everything we'd been circling. Kisses, glances, truths half-spoken. Before I could respond, he leaned in and kissed me, slow and certain, like he was claiming something we both knew was there. His hand cupped my jaw, warm and steady, and for a moment, I let myself fall into it, kissing him back with a hunger that scared me. It wasn't just want, it was need, raw and unfiltered, like I'd been starving for years. Then I pulled back, my breath shaky, standing so fast the room spun. "This stops now," I said, my voice cracking. "Last time." He leaned back, unfazed, his eyes still locked on mine. Too late for first, and too early for last. I turned away, my hands trembling as I grabbed the remote, pretending to fiddle with it. But my skin burned where he'd touched me, and my heart wouldn't slow. He didn't push, didn't chase, just watched me with that maddening calm, like he knew I was lying to myself. The projector flickered, a test pattern glowing on the wall, but all I could see was him. His certainty, his patience, the way he'd unraveled me without trying. I left the room, retreating to the kitchen, gripping the counter like it could anchor me. The divorce papers were still there. A silent scream in the drawer. Mark was gone, Ryan was here, and I was caught in the middle, drowning in choices I wasn't ready to make. I'd told Ryan it was the last time, but the truth was sharper. I didn't want it to be. And that scared me more than anything. More than Mark's secrets, more than Ryan's truths. Because if I kept going, I'd have to face what I'd been running from. Myself, and the life I'd let slip away. The new apartment smelled like fresh paint and solitude. Boxes lined the walls, half unpacked, their contents spilling like secrets I wasn't ready to face. Mark had signed the divorce papers without a fight. His signature sharp and final, like a door slamming shut. He'd moved out west, chasing a promotion or an escape. I didn't ask. The house was gone, sold in a blur of paperwork, and Ryan. Ryan hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't shown up. Until I found the note. It was tucked in the kitchen drawer, folded neatly among mismatched utensils. His handwriting was messy but deliberate. You felt it. You chose silence. That's a choice too. I stood there, the paper trembling in my hand, the empty apartment pressing in. The words weren't cruel, but they cut, because he was right. I'd felt everything. The pull, the heat, the terrifying clarity of wanting him. And I'd shut it down, every time, choosing the safety of silence over the chaos of truth. I sank onto the floor, the note still in my grip. The apartment was bare. No photos on the walls, no echoes of Mark's laughter or Ryan's footsteps. Just me, and the hollow ache I'd been carrying for years, now louder than ever. I thought back to the racetrack photo, the parking lot, the kiss in my room. Moments that had felt like warnings, invitations, lifelines. I'd ignored them all, thinking I was protecting something. My marriage. My stability. Myself. But what had I saved? The note wasn't an apology or a plea. It was Ryan, seeing me one last time, clear as ever. I pictured him writing it, his jaw tight, his eyes shadowed, knowing I'd find it after he was gone. He'd left because he had to, because I'd pushed him away, because staying would have meant forcing me to choose. And I hadn't. Not out loud. I stood, folding the note and slipping it into my pocket. The weight of it grounded me, a reminder of what I'd felt and what I'd lost. I walked to the window, the city buzzing below, indifferent. No one was coming to fix this. Not Mark, not Ryan, not the version of me I'd tried to be. The emptiness wasn't just the apartment. It was me, stripped bare, with nothing left to hide behind. I didn't cry. Instead, I grabbed a box, started unpacking. Books, dishes, a lamp I'd always hated. Each item felt like a step, small but deliberate, towards something new. Not answers, not yet, but a life where I'd have to face myself. Ryan's note stayed in my pocket, a quiet challenge to stop choosing silence. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I'd keep running from it. The coffee shop down the street became my ritual. A small rebellion against the quiet of my new apartment. Every morning, I'd sit by the window, black coffee with oat milk steaming in my hand, watching the city wake up. It was 3 weeks since I'd found Ryan's note. 3 weeks since I'd unpacked the last box and started calling this place home. But it didn't feel like home. It felt like a waiting room. I was scrolling my phone, avoiding emails, when the door chimed. My eyes flicked up, habit now, expecting nothing. But there he was, Ryan, in a worn denim jacket, ordering at the counter like he hadn't vanished. My heart lurched, a traitor to my resolve. He hadn't seen me yet, and part of me wanted to slip out, to keep the note as the last word. But I stayed, my fingers tight around the mug. He turned, scanning the room, and his gaze landed on me. No surprise, no hesitation, just that same steady look, like he'd known I'd be here. He walked over, coffee in hand, and slid into the seat across from me without asking. "You're predictable," he said, his voice low, teasing but soft. I raised an eyebrow, forcing calm. "And you're not supposed to be here. Yet here I am." He leaned back, studying me. "You look different." "New haircut," I said, brushing it off, but his eyes didn't buy it. He saw the real change, the weight I'd shed, not in pounds, but in pretense. The divorce was final, the house gone, and I was still figuring out who I was without it all. He sipped his coffee, the silence stretching. Then he said, "You ever think about what you didn't say?" My chest tightened. I thought about it every day. The kiss, the note, the 1,000 moments I'd chosen silence. "You made it pretty clear I chose wrong," I said, my voice steady but thin. "Did I?" He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Or did I just make you look at it? I stared at him, the coffee shop fading, the clink of cups, the hum of voices. It was just us, and the truth I'd been dodging. You left, I said sharper than I meant. You don't get to show up now and act like you know me. I never stopped knowing you. His words were quiet, but they hit like a pulse. You're the one who stopped looking. I wanted to argue, to throw his note back in his face, but my throat burned with the truth. I'd stopped looking, at myself, at what I wanted, at the life I could have had if I'd been braver. Ryan wasn't the answer, but he'd been the mirror, and I'd hated what I saw. He stood, leaving his coffee half full. You'll figure it out, he said, his eyes holding mine. When you're ready. Then he walked out, the door chiming behind him. I sat there, the mug cold now, his words echoing. The city moved on outside, but I was still, caught in the space between who I'd been and who I might become. Ryan was gone again, but this time, I knew. The next move was mine.